My name is Emil. I'm a solution engineer at Grafana Labs, and today I would like to give you a quick demo of how to correlate metrics, logs, and traces in cooperation with PII Data and Grafana Labs. I'm logged into Grafana, and the first thing I would like to show you is the new Kubernetes integration in Grafana Cloud, because the application we are going to use today runs in Kubernetes. It creates PII data and runs in a couple of pods. So that's the overview of my cluster. Looks healthy. I go into cluster navigation, and then the namespace where my application runs is called the gym. I see my pods and how they're running, the workload, little pods here, and I can draw in. And that's all good. Also can have a look at the node, just one. And then potentially I would like to have a look at the dashboards, picking my cluster namespace here, and I can really get a good insight and get all the information I need to optimize my Kubernetes cluster and make sure my application runs nicely. Talking about the application, I'm switching screens here and go to another one. So that's the application. It's a heart rate collecting application. I'm wearing a watch which measures my heart rate, sends it to the phone, goes to the cloud, and then the heart rate is collected by the application, visualized, and persisted. I'm going back now to my other screen and give you an overview here of the dashboard of the application. So I'm visualizing the heart rate data. As you might have guessed, there's also speed over time and pace over time and location information collected. So it's clearly PII data. I'm connected to Grafana right now here as Emil Simes. That's one of the two users I have in Grafana here. And I'm a privileged one, means I can and I have all the rights to read everything because I'm administrator. So I can have a look at this type of data, which clearly is PII data. There is another dashboard which I have prepared for today, and that's more the SRE view. The other was basically the business view. If it would be a real business application, then that would be really meaningful data. So it's just heart rates. But here we have an SRE view on top of things. And the application consists out of a listener collecting the data, sending it to another microservice, message producer, which sends the messages to a Kafka broker, then a consumer is reading them from the broker, and finally it's persisting them in a SQL database. You get some panels here showing interesting data from an SRE perspective, like the number of requests and duration, or messages in the topic. That's data which reflect or which comes from the Kafka broker. Just quick overview here that we have a nice dashboards for Kafka as well. I'm closing that again. So that's all good. So as you remember, there's data coming in here from my watch. But what I want to do now is really creating some load, because I just deployed a new version of my application. So in Grafana, I go to the pretty new K6 application thing. So K6 is an open source tool by Grafana Labs, which allows you to run performance tests. And I'm going to run my test now, which will take a couple of minutes to produce all the workers in the cloud, distribute the script, and then execute the script against my application. So while this is preparing, let's have a look on how I set up security. So first of all, we have a look at the teams. There are actually two teams involved. One is the non-sensitive team and a sensitive team. So in the non-sensitive team, I have a user called Digital Emil. And the sensitive team, I have the user Emil Simes. That's the user we were just seeing before. So I got these two teams. One should be allowed to see PII data. That's the sensitive team. and should be allowed to see all the data, right? Whether it's sensitive or non-sensitive. But the non-sensitive team should not see sensitive data. That's why I have two data sources. A non-sensitive data source and a sensitive data source. So if we go to the non-sensitive data source, we see the permissions. So the non-sensitive data source can be read by the sensitive team and the non-sensitive team as expected, right? This contains non-sensitive data, so everyone should be allowed to see that. The other data source, the sensitive data source, has other permissions, and only the sensitive team is allowed to read sensitive data. So we have these permissions, we got the teams, and then we need to have access policies which make the data sources what they need to do. So we got an access policy for the sensitive data source, and we are creating this access policy or combining it with a label-based access control. So this data source contains all the data which is labeled with app equals the gym. Contrary to that, the Loki non-sensitive data source contains only data which is labeled app the gym and sensitive equals false. So only log file or log lines which are labeled with sensitive equals false are accessible by this cloud access policy, which is combined with the non-sensitive data source, and only the non-sensitive team has only permission to read from this data source. So this is how that works. So now getting back to our case 6. So my test is running, and I'm going back to my, oh my god, this looks bad. Everything red, strange numbers, so something clearly went wrong. Now I'm going into my SRE dashboard and try to figure out what went wrong. So as you can see, I'm now connected as a different user. So it's still me, but it's a different account, the Digital Emil. And I'm a non-privileged user. And I also only have access to the non-sensitive data. But I can have a look at the application behavior in general. And what clearly happens here is that the number of SQL errors per minute is way too high. So there is something wrong here, and I want to investigate. There's really nothing in the logs here. So I go into the explore mode. And here you can see that this really is a metric. So there's a PromQL query, and that's the graph of the time series. So it's an important information because now I know that something is wrong, but it doesn't really give me insight into where things went wrong or why things went wrong. So what I want to do is now I'm just going to split my view, and I pick my Loki data source. So I want to correlate the time series data with the logs. Grafana automatically applies label from the left side to the right side, like in this case, app equals the gym. So the metrics and logs are correlated automatically. And if you're familiar with Loki, which is the log analytics tool in Grafana Cloud, you know that Loki indexes the timestamp and the labels, but not the individual content line. So it's really efficient. And I also want to correlate on time. So I press this button here, and now the left window and the right window, they're aligned in by time. So if I scroll down here a bit, I see a lot of input information, but really no PII data That's expected because I don't have the rights to. But I want to investigate maybe this time frame here, and I'm only interested in the errors. So now I can close my left window here. The errors, and I see, oh my, there's an integer, or there's a numeric constant which doesn't fit into int64, and that's why my application crashes and can't persist the data. So that's very helpful. I can correlate very easily metrics and logs. But as I'm not a privileged user, I don't have access to PII data. And to really go to the root cause, in this case, I would like to correlate the logs with the traces and find really out where in my application things are misbehaving. But the traces could potentially have, and they will have, PII data. So I don't have the right to access them. So I go to my colleague, the other Emil, and he opens up his dashboards as the privileged user. Obviously, it's the same dashboard, so it's having the same data, but I have the option to go to the sensitive data as well. So was that okay? We want to analyze the SQL errors. Going to explore them. All right. Splitting my window again. Split. Pick my sensitive data here. Correlate on time. I would pick some time frame here. Closing the window. And one thing which is obvious, that now I got actually access to PII data, like the SQL statement which failed. And it contains names and locations and heart rate, so that's sensitive. Again, I'm interested in the errors. And now I have the option to correlate my log file with my trace. I go into the trace view and going to close my left window here to make things a little bit more fitting to the window. So I got a spawn view here with my whole transaction and then the individual components in here. So all the components beside the broker are written in Node.js. So we see the listener here with the well-known Node.js middleware. To see the individual spawns, how long they run. And then we see that the listener was sending the message to the producer. The producer itself sending the message to a Heartrates topic in Kafka. And then the consumer was reading it and executing the insert. And PII data, which is okay because I'm the privileged user here at of the sensitive data team. And I see that this fails because the numeric constant is out of int64 range. But I do also see more, and within the attributes, I get a stack trace of my application, printing where really this happens. So it's a Node.js application, so I see the file name and the function and the stack trace where the problem happens. And in this case, it's handling the incoming messages from the broker. And for each message, the code executes the execute SQL function, which fails. So now I could go and now I am to my developers and tell them, there's something wrong here. Please either, fix the incoming data or change the database scheme, and then the application will happily work, and I can put that into production after another run of my K6 test, which verifies that everything works well. And with that, I hope that was useful. Thank you for your time and hope to see you soon again. Thank you. Bye-bye.